racially inspired?
I'm not going to discuss any of the facts about that. As I said possibly inspired. Thank you very much.
Are you establishing a link with Iran by seeking sources?
The FBI Director Robert Mueller and Attorney General John Ashcroft, their afternoon briefing. A couple of things to note out of that. Within a day or so, the Attorney General said the Justice Department will have a series of laws it will request that it will present to Congress, including expanding wiretapping authority so that no longer do officials have to tap a specific number. They can tap a specific individual no matter how many phones that person might have, and also that they would need to go to court only one time to get approval to cover the entire country, rather than going to court in each jurisdiction where a phone number or an individual currently is. The Attorney General would like to eliminate the statute of limitations on terrorism and put terrorism on equal footing with other crimes. He said there are cases where, for example, espionage is handled as a more serious crime than terrorism, and he'd like to see that changed. There's a fair amount of support in Congress for based on a conversation we had yesterday with Florida Senator Bob Graham, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, a fair amount of support for much of what the Attorney General has already or will be asking for. FBI Director Mueller didn't talk in much detail about the investigation, but did, at least to our hearing, play a little bit of defense on whether or not the FBI should have been able to track down the suspected hijackers before they committed their act. He at one point said it's very hard to find someone in the United States once they are in the country. CNN's Eileen O'Connor is working the investigative side. Clearly, you're not getting information much up from these briefings on the details. You must be doing something else. What do you got?
Well, what we're doing, Aaron, is we're basically taking names off of a watch list that's been distributed to car rental places, airports, hotels, things like that. And also through some sources, we had some names early on. And we're running background checks. And what we're also doing is we do some checks on names that are associated with the hijackers. We're doing very much what the FBI is doing. And what we're also doing then is cross-checking on these things and trying to see where these men moved, who their associates were, where they went to flight school. And then we're going and we're talking to people, neighbors, landlords, people near nearby restaurants. What were they like? What did they do? Very important piece of information we've been picking up all week relates to what he was talking about, cell phones. A lot of neighbors telling us they always saw these guys on cell phones outside their apartments. So, in fact, if they were being watched, they were talking outside of the apartment. And that sort of reminded me of my days in the former Soviet Union when we knew that we needed to be outside for certain conversations. So that wiretap law will be very critical for the FBI. They have been very frustrated in their efforts to find these people. Aaron?
Eileen, can you give us, can you put a number yet on the number of people we believe are being held as material witnesses at this moment?
Yeah, I can give you an update on that. That sources say that one of the men they have in custody on a material witness warrant was picked up on August 17th in Minneapolis, Minnesota on a passport violation. Now, he has now been transported to New York City for questioning, but he is not cooperating, according to sources. Zacharias Moussaoui came into the United States in February on a student visa for flight school. He was in custody when the terrorist attacks happened, again, on a visa violation. Two other men are cooperating. Authorities searched their apartment here in Jersey City near the mosque where those associated with the first World Trade Center bombing worshipped. Through computer checks that we have done, it appears they lived at various addresses with people who are potentially associates of some of the dead hijackers. The two men who lived at that address are Mohammed Jawed Asmath and Ayub Ali Khan. They were pulled off of a train that was going to San Antonio. They had box cutters similar to ones used by the dead hijackers. They had tickets on a flight from Newark to San Antonio. Also, sources now tell me that another of the four men held under those material witness warrants is a doctor from San Antonio. Federal authorities searched his home. They took him into custody. It appears it is a man whom Asmath and Khan may have been going to seek refuge from. Now, computer records indicate that that man went to a flight school, the same school in Arizona, as one of the dead Pentagon hijackers. Law enforcement are looking to see if that man really is the same man, and his last name is also very similar to two of the dead hijackers. So they're also looking, sources say, for some kind of family connection. Again, they haven't had that confirmed. They also, Aaron, continue to seek a man who lived in various places in Florida, but was connected potentially to Vero Beach and flight training there. The focus, really, connections among these associates, especially deep in New Jersey and Florida, with that other cell they thought operating out of Texas. They might have been able to get everybody there. Aaron?
Eileen, we talked last night about these pieces of a puzzle, and each day we seem to get another piece here, another piece there. It's not a clear picture by any means yet, but the pieces do come in.
They do come in, and increasingly they do lead, and that's why you have the President, the Secretary of State, and others saying that their prime suspect is Osama bin Laden. Those pieces put together with their interconnections all do seem to lead back to Osama bin Laden. By the way, Aaron, it's not just a puzzle pieces in the United States. These are puzzle pieces that are coming in from as far away as the Philippines, France, Brussels, London, and so very difficult to get them all and to get them all together. Aaron?
We'll let you go back to work. Thank you. Clearly a lot of work to be done. Eileen O'Connor, part of the team working on the investigative side of this. There's a diplomatic military side of this, and going on down here, there's the search and rescue and the markets to keep track of today, and we will continue to keep track of them all. CNN's continuing coverage of America's new war continues after this break.
This is a testing time for us. We have been tested before in other moments of our history, and this is another time. And I believe that we will pass the test. A lot of people have said over the last few years Americans have gotten soft and sloppy and indolent. And, you know, if a great challenge came, would we be up to it? We'll now find out.
What kind of rooms you got?
King size.
You got room service?
Donuts and coffee.
Got entertainment?
All rooms have every movie ever made in every language, anytime, day or night.
How is that possible?
This is the technology that makes it happen. This is Riding the Light. Quest.
It's easy to take electricity for granted. A lot of us aren't even sure where it comes from. So we're sometimes surprised to learn that over half of the electricity we use comes from coal.
Mrs. Windler!
And thanks to a $50 billion investment in clean coal technologies by America's electric utilities that use coal, it's getting cleaner every day, helping us protect something we can't take for granted: our environment.
Have you gotten yourself into too much credit card debt? You may be able to point and click your way out with a second mortgage from Ditech.com. Whether you have equity or no equity, Ditech has a second mortgage with a no closing cost option that may help lower your monthly payments. Why pay minimum monthly payments when you can pay off your high interest debt with a second mortgage from Ditech.com? For fast, friendly service, apply online or call us at 1-800-71-FIX now.
With the kind of deals we have here in Gateway Country, we don't need gimmicks to get you in the store. Right now, we'll give you this Epson Stylus printer free when you buy any Gateway Essential PC. This is the Gateway Essential 950C featuring the Intel Celeron processor. It's only $7.99. That's why I say we don't need gimmicks.
Really?
Offer ends September 23rd, so stop by soon or call 1-800-GATEWAY.
The site of the World Trade Center on a Monday afternoon in September in New York City. The work effort goes on. They still call it a rescue effort, and hopefully that is correct, but it has been a long time now. It's been, I believe, since Wednesday that anyone has been pulled out alive. It is not easy work down there. CNN's Michael Oku has been down there today for us and joins us now on just how difficult it has become. Michael, good afternoon.
You might see over my shoulder that Governor George Pataki of New York and, of course, the Mayor Rudolph Giuliani have been giving a press conference talking about the spirit, the great spirit that the rescue workers have as they toil through the rubble and the ash of the World Trade Center. I should tell you that according to FEMA, you correctly say it, that they are still calling this a rescue mission and that it will continue as long as it takes. They were very, very keen at a press conference this morning to make sure that everybody knew that they still consider it to be a rescue mission and not a recovery mission. And at some point in the future, they will let us know when they make that shift officially. Now, the first estimates of how long it will take to actually take all the debris out of that site are beginning to come in. According to FEMA, it will take them months. And you can imagine, Aaron, given the amount of debris down there, you can't expect them to be any more specific than that. The EPA is also here. It may be a very clear day in front of me, but they are here looking at the air quality. They believe that they have decontamination units on site, and they believe that some of the air, even though that many of the authorities here believe that asbestos levels are okay, that there is enough soot and other material in the air that may be injurious to some of the rescue workers and, frankly, some of the media and other residents here at the site. They also are looking into the possibility that one of the buildings close to the crash site had contained a great level of freon. So we'll be looking at that development as the day continues. As you can see behind me, the cloud of smoke continues to billow, not quite as thick as it was last week, but still just as persistent, and at times reaching a degree of thickness that belies the fact that this occurred almost a week ago at this point. The New York City Fire Commissioner has told us that, in fact, there are fires still raging deep within the rubble, and that they can't, in fact, put out those fires until they remove some of the debris from around it. So they are working around the fires, but you can imagine that at some sites very close in that rubble that the heat is very, very intense. And that makes, of course, the steel and some of the iron fragments that are strewn and littered throughout that site very hot and sometimes very dangerous to work on. Rescue workers continue to work 24-hour shifts here. They're hopeful that there are air pockets or voids where some of the victims might have survived. There is a mall right between where the World Trade Center was, and they're hoping that some of the victims might be in some area within that mall and in other what they're calling voids. Just a moment ago, a team of canine unit team came uptown here and told us that they are now again beginning to find bodies. The fact that they're finding victims might be hopeful that at least they're getting to areas where there were people and hopefully then survivors. I should also tell you that, of course, it has been slow going, and some of the rescue workers here are hanging in onto every shred of hope that they will find something. One of them told us this morning that they had a glimmer of hope when they went to an area that was completely incinerated but for a single Bible. Aaron?
Michael, thanks. I'm looking at these aerials as you were talking. I was on that helicopter flight yesterday morning. We flew over the site. I must say, it takes your breath away. It is broader than you imagine. It is uglier than you can believe. And both in mind and in heart, it takes your breath away. If we look behind us, I'm sorry, go ahead, Michael.
Well, it's interesting you say it takes your breath away. It quite literally, it's a tangible thing, because a couple days ago, not so much today, a little bit earlier this morning, you could still taste, if I can say that, some of what's going on here, because the air was laden with some of the debris, and it was very difficult to avoid that. So when you say it takes your breath away, that's very apropos.
Thank you, Michael, thank you. And you can sort of file this in the it probably doesn't mean a whole lot, but it's worth noting department. I think it's the first time that I've looked back there since Tuesday morning, and you can actually see the smoke has cleared enough so that you can actually see the buildings behind where the Trade Center was. Don't see them that clearly, but clearly there is less smoke out there, a sign that the work is getting done. Judy?
Aaron, we just listened to Michael Oku saying that authorities insist on characterizing what they're doing still as a rescue mission. They're not calling it a recovery. That word rescue must be so important to so many families and loved ones. Now we know New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani acknowledging some bodies may never be found, but for those families, those thousands of families, the wait continues, and so does the sense of hope. CNN's Elizabeth Cohen has one man's story.
When should hope end? When should searching turn into grieving? For the first few days after the World Trade Center explosions, Nelson Ortez was sure his brother Pablo was alive. Now he's just beginning to think that might not be true.
I'm going to miss him. If he's gone, I'm going to miss him.
Nelson does keep searching because he has some hope.
You know, there have been, in many earthquakes and other situations, people recovered alive 8, 9, 10 days afterwards. And in this site, there are tunnels and perhaps air pockets. It might take a miracle, but miracles have happened.
Ortez is hoping for that miracle, but preparing for the worst. Like hundreds of others, he's given DNA samples, DNA to be matched up with human remains from the explosion site. Those samples arrived at the state crime labs in Albany. Some of the DNA came from hairbrushes, razors, or toothbrushes used by the missing people. Others came from inner cheek swabs of close blood relatives. It's not clear how long the DNA matching process will take. When the lab reports do come out, in many cases, they'll have to take the place of having an actual body.
I think at this point, anything is better than this horrible uncertainty and nothingness that people are going through right now.
Since matching hundreds, if not thousands, of DNA samples will take time, families are left in an emotional limbo.
We try to say, you know, what if, what would be your plan if, for example, you found out today that there was a confirmation that your loved one was deceased? What kind of supports do you have around you? What would you need to help you through this?
That's the fine line Nelson Ortez is walking, hoping for life and preparing for death. Before he did his interview with us, he'd been at hospitals to see if perhaps his brother had been brought in alive. After the interview, he went to the city morgue. Elizabeth Cohen, CNN, New York.
And now, sadly, thousands of families in the United States finding out what it has been like in the past in wartime for families who have had a father, a son, a brother missing in action overseas, whether it was Korea, Vietnam, or somewhere else. For more now on the missing, let's go to Atlanta and Darren Kagan. Darren.
Judy, so many families living in limbo. We have two stories for you right now. One of a family saying goodbye, another of a family still holding out hope. First live pictures for you from Providence, Rhode Island. These are services being held for David Engel and his wife Lynn. He was the executive producer of the television show Frasier. He and his wife were on American Airlines Flight 11 that was going from Boston to Los Angeles before it crashed into the World Trade Center on Tuesday. Of course, he's responsible for one of the most popular television shows on television and also worked a lot on the show Cheers. Earlier this week, his agent shared that if you think back on some of your favorite episodes of Cheers, chances are David Engel is the man who wrote them. One note on today's service, it's being led by Vermont's Catholic bishop. Turns out Vermont's Catholic bishop is the brother of David Engel, so he is presiding over the memorial mass for his own brother and sister-in-law today in Providence, Rhode Island. From that sad scene in Providence, we're going to head here to our board at CNN.com. Of course, if you've been with us, you know that we have a site for the missing where families and loved ones can post pictures in their search and their hope to find what happened or perhaps the exact whereabouts of their loved ones. Today we're featuring a woman named Swarna Shalasani, and we have with us on the phone her brother Rao, joining us from Queens. Mr. Shalasani, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Your sister, I can tell from the information I can see on the board at CNN.com, 33 years old, works at Fiduciary Trust, 5'1", 110 pounds, and she was on the 94th floor of Tower 2. What else can you add to us about your sister?
There's so much to add. My sister was really the most enduring person to everyone whose life she's impacted. The three facets of her life, her family, her friends, her work. In terms of her work, she was really accomplished in her professional career. but outside of her professional career, she spent a lot of time helping a Southeast Asian organization called Saki, which basically helps survivors of domestic violence. So the last couple of days we've been hearing from survivors of domestic violence my sister has counseled, and so many have said how much she's helped them through encouragement and support. And some of them haven't even met my sister. In terms of her family, my grandfather passed away 2 weeks ago. She was the one who called my mom. We came home together. So the last time we saw my sister was when my mom was going to India for my grandfather's funeral. And the last time we saw her, she was crying. And again, we're in the situation where we're hanging on to the slimmest hope that she is still alive, because as your news reports say, it's still a rescue effort, and I hope it remains a rescue effort until we know for 100% that there's no chance. We've been going to all the hospitals in New York City and New Jersey and Brooklyn, Staten Island. What we haven't been able to find luck with is unidentified patients, because we are hoping my sister is one of them. We've given DNA samples for both my sister and my parents. We're trying to work with the medical examiner's office. The city is doing a tremendous job helping in this effort, but as victims, as family members of potential victims, we're hoping that we could do a lot more. It's just it's very unfair that someone like my sister, who's always done the best in everything she wanted, and she's always taken the most difficult road, and she was always the most honest and sincere person. Everyone she's met, she's affected. It's my mom is always hoping that she calls back. She's always trying to imagine the last hour of what could have happened, and my sister trying to call my mom, and my mom not being able to help. I was actually on the ferry going to World Trade Center because I had a 9 o'clock meeting at the Merrill office in Manhattan. I was trying to use my cell. All my cells weren't working that day. I actually saw the second plane crash into the building. And, here I am, hopeless. I've never been able to do anything for my sister when she really wanted me. But we're hoping, like the other families, that miracles do happen, and miracles happen to the best people, most deserving.
I am so sorry for what you witnessed and what you're going through right now. And I just want to correct you on one point. When you say you haven't been able to do anything for your sister, Mr. Chalasani, you're doing a lot for her right now in the effort to try to find her, posting her picture, looking for her, and most importantly of all, holding out hope and sending your prayers for your sister.
Yes, and I want to also offer out prayers and support for all the other family members. We share in their grief, but we are as hopeful as they are about their family members returning alive, hopefully. And I want to emphasize that this is something that's not just affected the United States, but it's really a global tragedy, and all the countries in the world should unite with U.S. in any efforts to eradicate terrorism, not for once, but for all, because this should not be a one-time effort. It should be a broad, coordinated effort like the Gulf War.
You mentioned your mother going to India at the occasion of your grandfather's funeral. Is that your country of origin, sir?
Yes, it's our country of origin, but we've come to the U.S. 13 years ago. All of us are U.S. citizens, so we take great pride in the opportunities and the freedom that U.S. has given us, and this is our home country now. And to say that, there are some elements in society who are taking advantage of the freedom given in this country. And those elements, especially those who focus on proving political objectives by taking out civilians, those elements in society should be given a very strong punishment, and it should be a continuous effort, not a one-time effort.
I appreciate your thoughts, Raul Chalasani. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, and our thoughts and our prayers are with you, sir, and your family. His sister Swarna is still among the missing of the Second World Trade Center tower. We'll take a break, and we'll be back after this.
There is a venture capitalist out there with hundreds of millions of dollars for technology firms, startups, expansions, firms with new ideas, all in a friction-free business.
Good afternoon. We'd like to fill you in on the President's Day.
To the White House spokesman Ari Fleischer.
President Bush this morning spoke with President Zayed of the United Arab Emirates. The two spoke about cooperation against terrorism. The President thanked President Zayed for his public statements of support and his willingness to help the United States. The President earlier today convened a meeting of his National Security Council to continue making plans. Earlier, the President visited the Pentagon to be briefed on the status of the call-up of the reserves and to thank the employers and families who we know will be making a sacrifice to allow the reservists to come serve our nation. The President is about to make a phone call to the Chancellor of the New York City Public Schools, Harold Levy, to discuss how the federal government is prepared to help the school children and the parents in New York City deal with this tragedy as children go back to school. The Secretary of Education is with the Chancellor right now. He will be there for the phone call, and he will be making an announcement about additional millions of dollars which will be provided to New York City Public Schools to help them in this effort and to help our children and to help their parents. A little later this afternoon, the President is going to be departing the White House to go to an Islamic center in the Washington, D.C. area, where the President intends to speak out very strongly about the need to remind all Americans that Arab Americans and Muslim Americans love the American flag just like everybody else who's a citizen of this country. And he's looking forward to that visit. He'll spend some time with the leaders of the community as well as various members of the community. The President considers that a very important meeting. Later this afternoon, the President will return for a meeting of the economic policy team where they will discuss the consequences of the terrorist attack on the United States from an economic point of view, as well as discuss the airline industry and the position the airline industry is in at this moment. Mrs. Bush will be in Pennsylvania for the memorial service for those who lost their lives in the crash of the airline in southwest Pennsylvania. Two announcements for you, and they'll be more than pleased to take questions. President Bush will welcome French President Jacques Chirac for a meeting and a private working dinner on September 18th, tomorrow. The visit is part of President Bush's continuing consultation with key allies about our global agenda, including the war on terrorism, and I note that this was a previously planned meeting. In addition, the President will welcome Amir Shaki Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani to Washington. He is the Amir of Qatar, QATAR, for a working visit on October 4th. And with that, I'm more than happy to take questions. David?
Economic front, the President talked about working with Congress on an economic stimulus package. Is he specifically preparing to back another tax cut? Does he think the country needs that right now?
Too soon to say, David. But the President will continue to keep his eye on the economy, and he will continue to listen to members of Congress in both parties about what steps, if any, they believe need to be taken to help the economy, if any need to be taken.
To follow up on that, can you be more specific? Is that one of the ideas that's currently being discussed, both in Congress and between Congress and the administration?
That is one of the ideas being discussed, correct.
What kind of tax cut? Are we talking about capital gains?
No, it's too soon to say. Too soon to say. The President will have the briefing later this afternoon, and so I would hesitate to speculate until the briefing.
I'll add further. Does the administration support the bill in Congress to provide assistance to the airline industry?
That's the topic that will come up at the meeting this afternoon. The best form that assistance, if any, is to be coming, could be available. So that's a topic the President will review, and he's very concerned about the health of the airline industry.
Will there be a decision on either one of these matters out of this meeting?
Let the meeting take place, and I'll try to keep you informed. And again, this is the beginning of a process where the President will keep his eye on the economy in the aftermath of the attack on the United States. So I'll keep you updated.
The Taliban is now saying that its Supreme Council will meet tomorrow to discuss the U.S. demand to turn over bin Laden. What's the administration's response to that? What are you looking for?
The President's response will be, he will see what they say, but this is much bigger than that. The President has made it clear, the Vice President has made it clear, the Secretary of Defense has made it clear that this war on terrorism is bigger than any one person. The Al-Qaeda organization is a network that is represented in some 60 countries around the world that exists beyond any one leader. And this war on terrorism is a war that the President said he is committed to taking throughout this organization that engaged in this attack on our country.
And the Pakistani officials are saying that they told Afghani leaders, the Taliban, they had 72 hours to turn over bin Laden. Is that a U.S.-sponsored deadline?
Yeah, anything involving any specific actions that may or may not have been taken by our allies in this matter, I'm not going to get into. And let me try to shed a little light on the reason for that, because there have been many questions about what have you asked your allies to do, and I've indicated to you the broad areas. We've asked our allies to cooperate with us in military areas, in financial areas, in economic areas, in political, and in diplomatic. And I understand why you want to know more. But for me to indicate to you anything more than that would also be an indication to our enemy about what concrete steps allies may be taking. And one of the easiest ways for them to get around any steps our allies may be taking is for them to know about them. So I wish somehow there was a way that I could share this information with people here and with the American people. But as you know, any answer I would give to that would also be directly provided to our enemy. And I will not do that. Rebecca?
All right. Two things. One is, we're hearing reports of an American airliner that had to make an emergency landing in Chicago today. FBI came on board apparently and took away 3 gentlemen. What kind of state of alert is the White House at and law enforcement about people who may still be flying that may be at danger? And secondly, has the president rescinded the order for the military to shoot down commercial airliners if necessary?
Okay. On the second point, I'm not going to address the exact status of the defense operations to protect the American people. Suffice it to say, the United States remains on a very heightened status of alert to protect the traveling public. But that's an operational question, so therefore I'm not going to get beyond what I've said. On the first part of it, you know, the president has tried every day in every way to warn the American people that this is a war and we are an open society. And obviously the events of September 11th, a terrorist organization was able to penetrate our country and to attack. And being an open society, everybody does still need to be vigilant. People still need to take care and to remember that we are in a war footing. And it is a different time and a different era, unfortunately.
Does law enforcement already in the United States, does law enforcement believe that there may be a number of suspects still at large in the U.S. that may have participated in the Tuesday attack and may be planning future attacks?
Concerns remain dealing with ongoing security, and that's why I think you've seen steps that are being taken by the Department of Transportation, the Federal Aviation Administration, to do everything possible to secure the traveling public, particularly in the air. So there's a reason for the stepped-up vigilance and for the stepped-up security. It's because there are causes for concern that remain.
There's a news report today that there's a division among the president's advisors about whether or how much to help the airline industry. As the president goes into this meeting, what's the current thinking about that? And is ironing this out one of the purposes of the meeting?
Well, I think, as you can imagine, in any major issue where it involves the health of an American industry, there's lots of factors that need to get considered, and the president will have a good opportunity today to start to address what the facts are. And as I indicated earlier, the meeting hasn't taken place yet. It'll take place mid to late this afternoon, and you may want to check back with me after that.
Harry, the IMF canceled their meetings today, and the Emir of Qatar is coming. Do you think the WTO ministerial should proceed as planned?
I have no information about that. That, of course, is in Qatar, and that's an entirely different security situation, so you can't put everything in the same category. Of course, the meeting that was canceled is right here in Washington, D.C., and that meeting would have involved bringing down police from New York, bringing down police from Philadelphia. Obviously, there's a major strain on the police departments along the East Coast, and they've made their decision. Helen?
Which items on the president's legislative agenda are now on the back burner and shelved for the year?
None. It was interesting, none. It was interesting. At the meeting last week with the Cabinet, the meeting of the Cabinet was called for the purpose of discussing with the Cabinet members again and collecting information from Cabinet secretaries about the status of combating the attack on our country and dealing with it. At the end of the meeting, however, the President called on all the members of the Cabinet to take action on our domestic agenda. The President reminded them that a patient Bill of Rights remains important, that there are a series of initiatives that are pending up on the Hill that remain important, and he called on them to get done, including education reform, which the President reminded them remains a top priority domestically. Helen, I think it's interesting. The Congress still has a job to do, and we still are a constitutional system, and that's what's kept us strong. That's what's going to enable us to win. So there is a domestic agenda. The president is committed to it. I think it's fair to say that you'll hear less about it because of the dominance, obviously, of dealing with an attack on our country. But the president told the cabinet members to be dedicated to it, and members of our staff are. John, and then we're working in order here.
A couple of times in the past 2 or 3 days, the president has talked about the need to rebuild New York, the need to do it as quickly as possible. Is it his opinion that the World Trade Center or something similar to it should be rebuilt?
I think it's too soon to say, John, and that's the type of conversation the president's going to want to have with New York officials and of course, with the many private organizations who are headquartered in the World Trade Center. But obviously, the president has a real keen eye out for how to help New York and how to bring New York, rebuild New York. What form that will take, it's too soon to say. This is 6 days after the attack.
But is he of the mind, though, that if you did not rebuild that building or a reasonable facsimile thereof, that it would be bowing to the terrorists?
No, I think, again, the president is going to have serious discussions at the appropriate time with the mayor of New York, with the governor of New York, with the appropriate people who are responsible for such an endeavor. But what the president is making clear is not only for the symbolism of rebuilding New York in the wake of attack, but for the humanity of it and for the deserving nature of helping New York. He is intent to get it done. Keith.
Can I just follow up on Hill's question? The president would like those issues addressed this year, patients' rights, education, and everything that was on the plate, Trade Promotion Authority, still this year?
That was his charge to the cabinet members.
Now, wouldn't that foster some disunity on the Hill? I mean, a lot of those very contentious issues, and he's looking for a united Congress.
You know, Keith, I guess that's one way to look at it. I don't think that's the way the president looks at it, and I think that in the wake of this, there is a different mood in the Congress and in the presidency about working with each other, cooperating with each other. So I make no such presumption. The issue should be proceed with the people's business on the domestic front and work together. Gene?
Can you give us any kind of summary about the Pentagon meeting the president had today?
The president received an update about the status of the call-up of the reserves, the number of people involved, the activities that they will be working in. The president, of course, listed many of those activities. You heard him himself when he was talking about engineering roles. He went through protecting the harbors, went through the whole list of activities which the reserves are helping in, and also talked about the employers and the families, the difficulty that a call-up can impose on them, and the president expressed his gratitude for those who provide such a vital service. It's interesting because the reserves really do play a tremendous role in our nation's ability to defend itself. It's not a passive role, it's not a small role, it's an integral role, and that's what they talked about.
Ari, can you talk about a conversation?
Yes, Ari, you know the eyes of the world are on the Wall Street today. Been closed for 6 days after the terrorist incident. Is the president being praised? I know Secretary O'Neill was over there for the opening, but is the president being praised continually of the behavior of the market, and not just the averages?
You know, I did not ask him when we went over to the Pentagon if he was aware of what the stocks were trading at that moment, but of course the president is keenly aware of the first day of the markets opening and the importance of the markets working and functioning. And it's a terribly important topic. That's why Secretary O'Neill has been so involved in it and will continue to be.
Will he be at the meeting this afternoon, the economic meeting?
Secretary O'Neill? I believe the meeting is of the White House staff that works with all the cabinet secretaries, but again, the meeting will be in a couple hours. Larry?
All right. Can you elaborate a little bit on the president's remarks today about wanted dead or alive? I mean, could you explain his intent? Is he essentially issuing an appeal for anyone to hunt down and possibly kill bin Laden?
I don't think you can elaborate. I think they were pretty plainly spoken.
How about in addition to that then, if we want to go to the same imagery, is there any consideration of a federal bounty, a reward?
No, there's nothing that I've heard about like that.
To follow up on that, yesterday afternoon the president used the term finding the perpetrators and bringing them to justice.
Right.
Is he talking about a form of justice in which you police, the international community polices, brings them to an international sense of justice in terms of judicial justice, or is he talking about specifically just military strikes, obliteration?
Well, and the president said that again today. He said that remark in the context of justice. He added that, as you heard in his comments. I think that justice comes in many different shapes and forms, and the president expressed his opinion about a couple of those different shapes and forms that it could come in.
So it's the comments that the president and his senior advisors have made about the increased security, the increased awareness that we will have to follow now, have been careful to note that we don't want this country's freedoms to be eroded by the terrorist attack. We want to remain America. And yet the presence of 5 or 4 Middle East nationals on a domestic flight is exceptionally rare. Are the rules different for non-Americans? Should that trigger now questions of Middle East nationals on domestic flights in large numbers? Should that trigger questions? And are non-Americans in this heightened sense, this more aware time, to undergo more close scrutiny than members of the Arab American community, non-Americans, to undergo more scrutiny than they did in the past?
Well, I think when you look at the fact that there are lines, sometimes people are told to get to their flights 4 hours early. That way they can all go through the same security review. I think it's perfectly clear that these provisions apply to one and to all. As a matter of law enforcement, that anybody who is believed to be violating the laws of the United States will be held accountable and responsible, and the laws target lawbreakers.
And whether we can be more focused on non-Americans in this time. I'm trying not to get to profiling. I'm trying not to get to the diminution of civil liberties. But is the scrutiny more on non-Americans than it can be on Americans?
Well, I think the scrutiny is on those who violate the law, and whether that's in the form of immigration, whether it's in the form of anything else that would give the law enforcement community reason to believe that there are threats. But I remind you again, the precautions that have been put in place apply to one and to all. And again, but the president also, there's a reminder here when he goes to the mosque this afternoon that it still is a time to remind all Americans about the role of civil justice in our society, about the role we all play as individuals in treating our neighbors fairly, and in making no presumptions about guilt. And that's one of the reasons the president is going. He wants to stand shoulder to shoulder with the American Arab community and Muslims to say that they too are patriots and they too are victims of this attack.
None of the hijackers was an
The White
American.
House spokesman Ari Fleischer with his daily briefing. Among the things he said, the president is keeping his eye on the market. So are we. We can tell you the Dow has now made a new low for the day, down 650 points. The NASDAQ at about a 100-point loss at this moment. This has all been sort of deteriorating a bit over the last 35, 40 minutes. Christine Roman is at the New York Stock Exchange. Christine, any particular reason for this?
Just more selling that seemed to stabilize a bit near the lows of the day, and then the sellers came in again sometime after about lunchtime. And now the Dow Jones Industrial Average, Aaron, is trading at the lowest levels since the last week of December back in 1998. So a lot of technicians and traders here are looking at some levels just below here, wondering if the selling can maybe stave off a little bit there. United Technologies, it's a Dow component, a big industrial conglomerate. It's down about 14 points. You got about 6 or 7 Dow components there, and down at least $5. We'll watch it throughout the afternoon.
Christine, thanks. We'll keep an eye on the numbers, and we'll keep the numbers on the screen. The Secretary of State Powell, has begun his afternoon briefing. And he opened it by saying all roads lead to Osama bin Laden, the Secretary of State.
Try to persuade the Afghans, the Taliban leadership, that they should do what they have been required to do for a number of years under UN resolutions and reject this presence in their country, this invasion of their country by a terrorist organization. We mean no ill toward the people of Afghan. They are a suffering people. They are a poor people. And it is for that reason alone they should not allow these invaders to put their society at risk and to connect themselves to the government of Afghanistan. So I'm very pleased that more and more people around the world recognize the nature of this campaign, recognize that we have to get involved, recognize it's not going to be solved in one day or 1 week, but it'll be a long-term campaign. And as the President and other government officials have indicated earlier, we are also doing everything necessary to protect ourselves here at home and to put ourselves on the right kind of security footing so that we can be vigilant and alert to the threats that still exist within the country or may be directed at us in the future. With that, I will take a few questions. I'm once again under a time limit.
Is
Yes.
it too early? Do you have any indications of how the message is being received by Taliban? The Saudi foreign minister is coming here Wednesday, and could you tell us what you will ask of the Saudis, and whatever they do, would you prefer this time that they be explicit?
I always like explicit rather than vague, and I look forward to seeing Foreign Minister Saud when he comes here. And I have spoken to him, I guess it was last Thursday or Friday. I losing track of the days. And so I expect he will be forthcoming. I expect he will be coming with a message of support and commitment. And I know that they are looking at a number of ways in which they can help us, and we will welcome that help and assistance. They are good friends of ours. They have condemned this act from the very outset, from the very beginning, from last Wednesday morning on. And I'm sure he is coming with a message of continued support and commitment, but I don't want to get into what specifically we might be asking of them. Robin?
Any early indications of what Taliban is saying?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
The Taliban, of course, is responding in the way that it always has, that Osama bin Laden and his associates are guests in their country. Well, it's time for the guests to leave. Rogan?
Two things. First of all, the Pakistanis are saying that there was a deadline of 3 days to hand over Osama bin Laden. Is that true?
Whose deadline?
That the deadline for the Taliban to turn over Osama bin Laden.
The Pakistanis gave
Yes.
them a deadline? Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Is it a Pakistani?
I don't know I don't know if that is the case, that the Pakistanis actually said that, and whether they said it in their own name or whose name, but it wasn't in our name.
It wasn't your. And secondly, on the front line, have you made specific and formal requests to all frontline states around Afghanistan, including Iran?
No, we have not made specific requests for assistance. Those requests are being considered now by our intelligence, law enforcement, and military communities to see what might be needed as we put our contingency plans together. Nothing has been asked of Iran in particular. Yes.
Mr. Secretary, can you say whether this government intends to contact the Taliban and to give either an ultimatum or whatever words you care to choose, the language? Can you deal with these people?
I'm sure there will be some communication in the future, but I'd not like to characterize what that communication might be yet.
Mr. Secretary, as you put the pieces of your diplomatic puzzle together, could you sort of elaborate for us on the importance that Saudi Arabia, Morocco, and other Islamic states play within the Arab world in sort of building this international consensus?
I think they are important, not only those specific countries, but all countries, Arab and otherwise, but especially Arab, to come out and condemn this kind of activity because it's a threat to their own countries. There isn't one of them you mentioned that hasn't faced some kind of terrorist attack against their legitimacy, against their own sovereignty. And so it is important for them to speak out, especially when we have seen strong statements from Pakistan. And I think Pakistan would like to see other Arab and Islamic countries speak out and act in as strong a way as Pakistan has. And, Uzbekistan has been rather forthcoming, and others have been rather forthcoming. And I think as the days go by and as the various plans come together, you'll see more and more of them speaking out. The UAE has said it is reviewing its relationship with Taliban activities within the UAE, and we'll see where that leads. The Sudan has become suddenly much more interested and active in working with us on various items. So there are a lot of things that are going on that will become more manifest as time goes on. Let me go in the back, all the way in the back.
Mr. Secretary, did you get the chance to talk to the Greek Foreign Minister?
Yes, I did.
For this crisis?
I did. I talked to my colleague George Papandreou over the weekend. I can get the specific date for you. Richard has a rather imposing list of phone calls, but I can no longer remember which day. It was over the weekend, both to my Greek and to my Turkish colleagues on the same day.
Is
turning over Osama bin Laden enough? Are there other things the Taliban will also
We are
have to do?
after the Al-Qaeda network. It's not one individual, it's lots of individuals, and it's lots of cells. As I said on television yesterday, Osama bin Laden is the chairman of a holding company, and within that holding company are terrorist cells and organizations in dozens of countries around the world, any one of them capable of committing a terrorist act. So it is not enough to get one individual, although we'll start with that one individual. It will not be over until we have gotten into the inside of this organization, inside its decision cycle, inside its planning cycle, inside its execution capability, and until we have neutralized and destroyed it. That is our objective. Yeah. Sorry.
The Taliban today is apparently offering that a court of Islamic clerics would determine the fate of bin Laden and that they would accept that outcome. But this is something they've offered before, and the U.S. rejected it before. I want to know if that's still your feeling, if that is any kind of flexibility. And also, is there an interagency team planning to go into Pakistan anytime soon?
On the first point, I'll wait and see what they end up doing and what that court decides once it is convened in whatever fashion it convenes itself and what action it takes. I don't want to prejudge what we might do in response to what it might do. With respect to an interagency team going to Pakistan, we are making a determination now, and it'll take a day or two or a couple of days as to what we might want to ask the Pakistanis for, and when that has been determined, then we will form a team appropriate to that task. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Are you certain that Osama bin Laden is still in Afghanistan, and are you confident that the Taliban could actually find him?
I can't be certain of where he is. I'm reasonably confident and certain that if the Taliban government wanted to find him, they would know where he is if he is still in Afghanistan, and I have seen nothing to indicate he is not still in Afghanistan. Yes, sir.
Mr. Secretary, how do you plan to follow up on the positive signals being sent from Iran?
From Iran?
Yes.
As I said yesterday, these are positive signals, and I've had it reinforced that it is a positive signal, and it's worth exploring. And that's where I would leave it right now, not move it any further than that, worth exploring. Remember now, as you surely do, that Iran is a nation we have designated as sponsoring state terrorism. And they may want to make cause against the Taliban, but will they make cause against other terrorist organizations that they have provided support to? And I'm willing to explore that. But let's not get any further than that. I'm not, some suggested that they're part of the coalition, they're going to be partners. Not so fast. We recognize the nature of that regime. They have said something that is different than what we have heard from them previously. They too are shocked by what happened, they tell us, and so it seems to me that is an opening worth exploring, and that's as far as we go right now. I'm running out of time. Yes, sir.
Who has not responded well? What countries have disappointed you in their response? And secondly, last week, Deputy Defense Secretary Wolfowitz used the phrase ending regimes that sponsor terrorism. No administration official has repeated that formula. Are we really after ending regimes, or are we simply going to try to change their behavior?
We're after ending terrorism. And if there are states and regimes, nations that support terrorism, we hope to persuade them that it is in their interest to stop doing that. But I think ending terrorism is where I would like to leave it, and let Mr. Wolfowitz speak for himself.
Anybody what countries have fallen short, let's say?
Oh, I really don't have a list of fall shorts. Some have been able to do more than others. Some, it is rhetorical in nature, and they really don't have much else to give us other than words of support and encouragement. Others, it is far more than that, to the point of, if you have to do something militarily, ask us if we can participate. So it is a full range. But within the capabilities that they have, I am satisfied, very satisfied, with most of the responses that I've received. Where there is an opportunity for a country to do more and they haven't yet offered to do more, I'd rather deal with them rather than single them out. One more, then I got to go. Okay, Barbara, sorry.
Secretary, NATO said they would be with us, but apparently Italy, there was a statement this morning that Italy would not participate militarily in any sort of action. And there have been some countries in the Middle East and elsewhere that have expressed concern that this is going to be too broad a campaign and they want it to be very narrowly focused and they're nervous. What would you say to them?
Sensitive to all those concerns. I heard something quite different from Italy, but my Italian colleague will be here this week, so Renato and I can talk directly. And we
following that's on the Middle East.
Hold on. Pushy.
I'm in New York.
I forgot the question. Next.
The question was.
Jane, pick it up.
No. Taliban. You just said a little earlier that there will be communication, but you would prefer not to characterize it. Yet yesterday, I think you said that in a couple of days, the United States would be talking to the Taliban. Are you suggesting here that the first communication will be military rather than anything else?
No.
So
I think both statements are consistent.
So
communication, contact.
When will the United States be talking to the Taliban? Will we be sending someone in from Islamabad?
That's what I also said today, that I'm not prepared to comment on the modalities or when or under what set of circumstances or what the nature of the communications will be, because that's still being resolved. Okay, Barbara, do you remember what the question was? I'll try to remember the answer.
The second part of the question, forgive me as an ex-New Yorker, was about Israel. Ariel Sharon has not been terribly helpful, it seems, in this. A lot of Arab countries are saying we have to do something about this conflict and we have to restrain Sharon or a coalition isn't going to fly.
I think we do have to do something about the situation in the Middle East. I carve out part of my day to press and work on that. Prime Minister Sharon and I had a very long phone conversation last night, and we talked about his latest approach of his son and an official from the ministry visiting with Chairman Arafat and talking about how this series of meetings could get started. And I never lose sight of the fact that one of the underlying continuing problems we will have, we had it before 11 September, we're going to have it for the foreseeable future, is that we have to get into the Mitchell plan and we have to get back to negotiations in due course. And so I can assure you I haven't taken the United States' eye off that ball. I do have to go. Thank you. I really that's all.
Secretary of State Powell. There was a moment towards the end of the briefing where there was some give and take with reporters. The Secretary of State smiling, laughing at one point. We haven't seen many smiles and laughs over the last week. Perhaps a sign that literally things are getting gently back to normal. The market has bounced off its lows at about 6 down, the Dow down about 675. Come up a little bit from that, but still down from where it was 2 hours ago. Rhonda Scheffler's at the stock exchange. Rhonda?
Aaron, the selling here is still very dramatic, very much a minute-to-minute sort of market here. The Dow a short time ago hitting a new session low. At this point, if the closing bell would ring now, never before has the Dow fallen with so many points. We're not seeing percentage losses yet on an historic basis, but that doesn't make the selling easier for some investors to bear. I should point out, though, while trading volume is extremely heavy and we are on track to have record volume here at the New York Stock Exchange, the selling continues to be orderly. When you look at traders on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, they are walking from post to post. You do not get the sense that they are scurrying to get orders filled right away. It's a very orderly market. It is unsettling to see the numbers down as much as they are. It is not unexpected, however. Many people believe the selling would be as bad as it is right now. What's going to be key here over the next couple of hours is whether the market comes off these lows at all. That would be seen as a victory on a day when you're seeing losses across the board. Because keep in mind, the world markets were waiting to take their cue from Wall Street. So at this point, orderly trading, heavy losses across the board, heavy volume, no sense of panic. Aaron.
Well, the market did at one point today come off its low and then it drifted back down. So we'll just have to keep an eye on it. Do we have any idea who's selling? That is to say, are these big institutions or individual investors or some combination of both?
Aaron, it really does look to be a combination of both at this point. You can see institutional moves in the market by what's known as block trades. Those are tens of thousands of shares that change hands. We have had block trades here. You do get the sense that it is across the board. Remember, the thought early on was that the institutions were going to wait after the first hour of trading or so and see how the numbers were holding up before deciding their next move. But the volume on the tape tells you that there are a lot of people right now, retail, institutional, in there selling the market down. But again, we're still hearing from traders that the selling is orderly. Aaron?
Rhonda, thank you very much. The Secretary of the Treasury, Paul O'Neill, coming up in just a moment. CNN's continuing coverage of America's new war after a short break.
Developments as events unfold in America's new war. Stay with CNN.
Medicare medication coverage. Are you having difficulty using inhalers or mixing your breathing medications? Do you use Proventil or Albuterol, Atrovent, Combivent, or other breathing medications? Did you know that if you qualify, Medicare covers breathing medications that are already premixed? To find out if you qualify, call us at Med4Home.
Call toll-free 1-800-403-3609.
Are you one of the millions of American males who would like increased sexual energy? If you've been considering Viagra as a solution, consider something different. All-natural Enerx. Clinical studies show various ingredients of Enerx enhance sexual energy, increasing desire, performance, and satisfaction. Enerx is all natural with no side effects. With Enerx, you'll feel the increased energy within minutes and with no chemicals. We're so sure you and your mate will be completely satisfied. We'll offer you a 30-day, no questions asked, full refund. Enerx stimulates sexual energy by expanding the blood vessels, causing increased blood flow to specific areas of the body. Unleash the power of Enerx now.
Call 1-800-367-3614 toll-free, and it will be delivered discreetly to your home. Get results using the safe, all-natural alternative, Enerx.
Is your child protected for the future? For years, Gerber has been telling you about the Grow Up Plan. It's a $5,000 cash value life insurance policy that costs less than $1 per week. At age 21, the protection doubles to $10,000 with no increase in premiums. Call now for your free information package. The Gerber Life Grow Up Plan, a solid investment in your child's future. Call now.
Call this toll-free number for free information about Gerber's Grow Up Plan. Call now.
This is CNN.
On this Monday in New York, we keep a close eye on the stock markets. They've come off their lows of the day. The Dow is down about 675, give or take. So just in the last 15 or 20 minutes, it's bounced up a bit from that. The NASDAQ, too, has come back a little bit more. Back to the trading floor, Christine Romans is at the New York Stock Exchange. Christine? Okay. All right, we're having some audio problems with Christine. Just take a look at the sectors that were in the most trouble, and first among them, the airline sector. No one is surprised by this. Airlines obviously are being hammered today. Insurance companies not doing well. We noted Disney stock. Disney also is affected by the general economy, but also by people's willingness to get on airplanes and go to theme parks. And Disney was having a tough day. It has not been since December 31st, 1998, that the Dow Industrials have been below 9,000. They are now. As the market down, the Dow down 642 points, and does seem to be moving off the lows. Lou Dobbs joins us now. He has Secretary of the Treasury Paul O'Neill with him, and I imagine the Secretary has his eye on the market as closely as anyone. Lou?
Exactly right, Aaron. Thank you. Treasury Secretary O'Neill, one of many who gathered to ring the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange this morning, working hard through his department and other agencies and, of course, Wall Street to ensure an orderly open and orderly day. Mr. Secretary, thanks for being with us.
Glad to be here.
We have a significant sell-off. We have some volatility. What is your thought right now?
I'm very pleased the markets are open again. It's a beginning and end note for the U.S. economy that we have, in effect, a world financial switching center where buyers and sellers come together and make markets, and not having them for 4 days is really very unusual, not since the First World War. It's nice to have the markets back in business.
These markets being closed, as you say, for 4 sessions, it has been a very long time indeed since that has happened. With that pent-up frustration on the part of buyers and sellers, this is not an entirely unexpected result in at least the early going today.
Well, I think that's right. You have to always remember when you're looking at markets, for every seller there's a buyer, and for every buyer there's a seller. My guess is when we look a year down the road, the people who bought today are going to be the happy people. The people who sold will be sorry they did it.
Well, this morning when you and I talked earlier, you said you felt that we would see new records in this market. I guess the question to follow up with here a couple of hours later is how soon?
Well, I don't know. I think it's conceivable we could be approaching the tops on the Dow side in another 12 or 18 months. Well, no one knows for certain, but I think we've not retreated so far on the Dow side that we couldn't be looking at the records again when we get into the middle of the next expansion phase in our economy.
The expansion phase of the economy, a lot of mixed views, obviously, in terms of where this economy is headed. The strength of this economy, obviously ebbing going into the last month. We started to see some weakness in terms of the consumer that we had not seen. Is it your judgment that this economy is stronger than some would have it?
Well, you know, I think those who saw weakness weren't paying any attention to the positive factors that continue to exist in our economy. And the last few months, I thought the positives outweighed the negatives, not by a lot, but by an amount, and that with the flow of funds that was going into the economy a week ago today, I would have said then, and I will say now, I think we're on the move back. We have a resilient economy. You know, the crops are still growing in the fields, and the people are still showing up in the factories, and the shopkeepers are out there. Even here in Midtown New York, you can begin to feel a quickening pace again. We'll get our act together. We're going to be okay.
No recession?
I don't think so.
And in terms of the event that precipitated all of this, the devastating terrorist attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, all of that, whether one looks at it geopolitically in terms of terrorism, howsoever, fundamentally there are economic and financial underpinnings. All that happened required money, planning, sophisticated maneuvers of money. Has your department and other agencies as well, have you found any links, any indications as you go from bank to financial institution around the world looking for the money of Osama bin Laden and other countries or organizations?
Well, you know, I think for some time we in the United States have lived in our minds in a world that was free from terrorists and the murders, and it turns out we were too soft in our understanding of what could possibly happen to us. And what you're going to see now is an all-out attack on, first of all, labeling terrorists and suspected terrorists, and then systematically going after their financial assets, not just waging a usual kind of war against these kind of people, but waging a financial war and enlisting the leaders of civilized world countries and their financial institutions in helping us identify who these people are and where their money is and taking it away from them.
Mr. Secretary, let me put it straightforwardly. There are countries and banking systems within those countries that have said they are either neutral or not to be in any way complicit in an investigation by the United States or any number of other countries. The President has said you are, in effect, either with us or against us. Does that apply to international banking?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The civilized world needs to band together. We need to use all the tools that are at our disposal to get these people, and we intend to do that.
Mr. Secretary, we thank you for being with us on this opening day of the New York Stock Exchange and return to what we hope is normalcy in U.S. markets and markets around the world.
Thanks for having me.
Secretary Paul O'Neill. Well, Aaron Brown, back to you on this day in which we have seen the Dow retreat from a bit from its lows, and we still have a ways to go, about 2 hours, to see what truly happens here in the waning hours of trading today.
Lou, thank you. It's a lot of red out there, a lot of red numbers. We saw Philip Morris, though, was up a fraction, so I guess in good times or bad, people keep smoking, and maybe they keep smoking a little more in bad times. But not much good news out of Wall Street. Our senior White House correspondent, John King, joins us now. President, some very pointed words today. Other events at the White House. John, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, Aaron. The Treasury Secretary just again echoing. It's remarkable, the very muscular, if you will, for lack of a better term, language from people throughout the administration, from the President on down. The Treasury Secretary just there telling Lou Dobbs, even in matters of international finance, the administration adopting an us or them strategy here, with us or against us. We know the President has been making that case directly in diplomatic phone calls around the world, Secretary of State Powell as well. And a bit earlier today, President Bush over at the Pentagon, meeting there to discuss the call-up of 35,000 or so reservists. You see him here with the Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, his National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice, other Pentagon officials. This for a briefing on just how the Pentagon will use the National Guard members and the reservists who are called up. But when the President was asked about the prime suspect, Osama bin Laden, Mr. Bush using very, very tough language here. Again, the administration has said it is planning a possible military campaign. Listen to the tough words of the President of the United States.
Osama bin Laden is just one person. He is representative of networks of people who absolutely have made their cause to defeat the freedoms that we understand, and we will not allow him to do so.
Do you want bin Laden dead?
I want him held. I want justice. And there's an old poster out west, as I recall, that said "Wanted, dead or alive."
Now, Mr. Bush emerging from that meeting to shake hands, as you see here, walking down the corridors of the Pentagon, shaking hands with members of the armed services. A poignant moment off camera, Aaron. The President, after shaking these hands, walked into a cafeteria. Among the people he greeted, there was a pregnant woman whose husband is among those killed in the attack on the Pentagon. As the President was in meeting with families at the Pentagon, one person in the room quietly began singing "God Bless America." Others in the room picked up on that song. The President himself, who was preparing to leave the room, stopped and stayed and joined in the singing of "God Bless America." The President now back at the White House, about to leave the White House to visit a mosque here in the Washington area. That's another part of the President's duties these days. At the White House, they say they are increasingly concerned with a backlash in American public opinion against Arab Americans. Mr. Bush to visit an Islamic center in the Washington area to urge the American people, as they hear all the news about the suspects being of Middle Eastern and Arabic, perhaps Muslim origin, not to take that out on Arab Americans living here in the United States. Aaron?
John, the President sounded very much like the Texan that he is at one point when he said that bin Laden wanted dead or alive. Just the tone of that was striking, wasn't it?
The tone is striking, and some people are raising alarms about this. The rhetoric has increased. The tone of it has escalated in recent days. Domestically, some political advisors to this White House, outside advisors, saying the president is setting the bar pretty high here, that the administration has now made clear that it will get, to use the words of Mr. Bush and others, Osama bin Laden, a task that proved the Clinton administration tried to do and was very unsuccessful. And remember, this comes at a time the president trying to build an international coalition that includes many moderate Arab states, Saudi Arabia and Egypt among them, Pakistan included in the groups, countries that have radical Islamic fundamentalist problems, if you will, domestic problems of their own. Many ambassadors from those countries concerned that such language, bin Laden is a popular figure among certain populations in those countries. Many of their ambassadors here in the United States telling the White House such strong language, wanted dead or alive, is not helpful to them at all. Aaron?
Just one other thing, John. This administration, very disciplined administration. The president, when he talks to reporters, very disciplined. Just in watching him today, I had the sense that he was improvising a little bit more than he often does. And let me just, did you have any sense of that, or was it just one of those things in my head?
Well, certainly the president is speaking off the cuff much more often. No notes there, but administration officials say they believe that's when the president is at his best. Look back at the criticism of the president or the analysis of the president over the past 6 days. Many critical of that Oval Office address on the night of the attacks, highly complimentary of the unscripted president throwing his arms up around the firefighter in New York, talking into a bullhorn. The president speaking off the cuff is what this administration believes is his best venue. Many here, though, privately taken aback by the frontier justice, if you will, of the President of the United States saying wanted, dead or alive.
He's a Texan. John, thanks. John King, our senior White House correspondent. As you watch the crawl of stocks going by, it is the airlines that are being hit the hardest. Leo Mullen is the Chief Executive Officer of Delta Airlines, and he joins us now from Atlanta. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
How bad is it for the industry right now? Are people calling in droves, canceling flights? Anyone really getting on airplanes today?
Well, we have had considerable patronage. We were actually reasonably pleased over the weekend that we were carrying on both Saturday and Sunday about 140,000 passengers each day. Now that compares to an average Delta passenger load of 300,000 a day, so about half. But clearly, as those numbers would represent, the American public is beginning to fly, and from that standpoint, that's a good sign.
The industry is working very hard in Washington to try and get some direct aid. The House was dealing with $2.5 billion in direct aid, another, I think, $12 billion in loan guarantees. The message here is that the industry is in considerable jeopardy, that some airlines are going to collapse. Fair?
There is tremendous financial stress in the airline industry right now. Just last week, as you would know, we had almost 4 days with no revenue at all. And the general expectation after a crisis of this magnitude is that there will be a considerable period of time where revenues will run way less than they would have otherwise. And given the heavy fixed cost nature of this, with great capital investments for airplanes and terminals and other fixed equipment, if you have even minor changes in revenue, it can create enormous changes in cash flow. These are beyond minor. These are about as massive changes as it could get. And so it is going to affect all airlines throughout the United States in a very, very significant way. Now, from our standpoint, certainly the administration and the Congress, we feel, have been very responsive to this. I think, generally speaking, that there is a feeling in Washington that they wouldn't want the airline industry to be the first economic casualty of this war. And so, as a result, we have received enormous encouragement with respect to the program that is being developed, has been developed over the weekend, will be presented to the administration officials tomorrow, and I believe be very quickly the subject of hearings in the Congress.
Continental has announced layoffs. Continental's announced flight reductions. You've announced some trimming of flights. Do you expect to be laying off people?
Well, we would hope to certainly minimize that as we move forward, and that really depends on the outcome of these discussions that we have in Washington. Quite clearly, if business stays down for a significant period of time, then employee reductions would have to be definitely considered, as some airlines have already announced. On the other hand, we have new requirements that have been asked of us associated with the added security. We are fully on board as the airline industry with these security arrangements. We have participated extensively in helping develop them in conjunction with the government. And and Delta, we support these very, very strongly. But they do, in fact, require additional manpower. And so with the customer service requirements and the manpower implications of the increased security, we have to be very careful to balance the requirements to achieve that with the necessity that we will have to reduce employment if, in fact, support were not appropriately provided by the government. But as I say, I'm cautiously optimistic with respect to the discussions that are forthcoming with the government.
Back when the Gulf War buildup was going on, and after the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, airline travel dropped off at that point. This situation is obviously unique, but just looking back at the Gulf War situation, how long did it take for customers to be confident again that it was safe to fly?
Well, it took there was a month of a very, very substantial drop-off, and we would anticipate at least that amount of time, a month to 6 weeks, certainly for a tremendous drop-off from traffic from what it would be. And then it gradually builds up, and really it didn't reach the levels that it had prevailed prior to the Gulf War until almost a year afterwards. In this particular instance, we're into uncharted waters here. I don't think any of us can really predict exactly when it would come back, but certainly from the standpoint of the industry, we are expecting a lengthy amount of time before we get back to the levels that would have prevailed otherwise.
Mr. Mullen, thanks for joining us. Leo Mullen, the Chief Executive Officer of Delta Airlines, joins us from Atlanta today. We'll check down on the streets of New York and around the country, CNN's continuing coverage of America's new war after a break.
Life is going to be difficult, but that's understandable. If security and safety are uppermost in our minds, and they are, then we're going to have to put up with inconveniences. Yes, we're going to have to get to the airport much, much earlier. We're going to have to be very suspicious and observant of anything that looks suspicious, whether it be a briefcase left by a curb, a package, things like that. We've got to become very, very aware of our surroundings because we have people in our midst who wish us ill.
Point. Shoot. Create. The HP Pavilion 7970 with the Intel Pentium 4 processor. How will you use it? Save up to $250 by mail on the HP Digital Photography Studio.
Introducing new Kellogg's Special K Red Berry cereal. Crunchy sweet flakes, now with slices of real strawberries, right in the box. Looking good, never tasted so great. Kellogg's Special K Red Berries. It's new.
Now's the best time to join America Online. Plug it in and you go. Because now you can try AOL and get our best offer ever. 1,000 hours of AOL free for 45 days. You don't need a credit card. Call 1-877-265-0200 to get everything AOL offers.
You've got mail.
I've got mail. I love when an instant message pops up.
Customer service is always there to help. To get online in minutes plus 1,000 free hours, call 1-877-265-0200. Operators are standing by. If we could do it, anyone can. America Online. So easy to use, no wonder it's #1.
Business.
E-business.
Sir Speedy Printing.
SirSpeedy.com.
Face-to-face.
Online interface.
Personal.
Productive.
Local.
Global.
Very human.
Very modern.
Easy.
Easy.
Sir Speedy.
Either way.
Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton and New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani together walking their way through some of the damage area. The mayor and Mrs. Clinton, for that matter, have both been down there a number of times. There's New York Governor George Pataki as well. What they are seeing is a rescue effort that is still called a rescue effort, though it has been some days now since anyone has been pulled from the rubble of the World Trade Center alive. Gary Tuckman has been down there for most of the last week, and he joins us now. Gary, good afternoon.
Aaron, good afternoon to you. The New York Stock Exchange is only about 3 or 4 blocks away from here, but these areas are like 2 different worlds. Here, the public still isn't allowed. There are thousands of emergency workers and vehicles on the scene. The street is always clogged, and it's just emergency vehicles that are clogging it. And the scene is still very disturbing, very depressing, and frightening. Behind me, where the 110-story towers used to stand, that cauldron of smoke. And it's still smoky because fires continue to burn underneath the rubble. The search effort does continue. The bad news is nobody has been found alive since Wednesday morning, but officials are still holding out hope that it is a possibility. We talked with a remarkable man a short time ago, a firefighter by the name of Ken Haskell. He comes from a family of firefighters, 3 brothers. One of his brothers is missing. The other one has been found dead. Nevertheless, he continues to participate in the search.
Timmy's been found. He was found several days ago. I was underneath Tower 1, a void of Tower 1, the day before yesterday when word had spread that they had found him, and some of the members from my company came and got me, and they told me that Timmy had been found, and I left, and they had sent the van to pick me up.
I think it's hard to imagine the horror he and his family are going through right now. One other anecdote to talk about how the landscape of New York has changed literally and figuratively for the people who live here. When you take a subway in New York City and you get out of the subway station, there are often 4 or 5 different exits to get out of. And when you get out of the subway, even if you know it well, and you go out of a different exit, you may not know what direction you're facing. By habit, many New Yorkers, when they get out of the subway, look up for the World Trade Center to know which way is south. And even I, who has been covering this story since the very beginning and knows full well what happened, when I got out of the subway to come here today, that's the first thing I did. I looked up for the World Trade Center. Aaron?
Gary, thank you. People may think it's a little bit silly, for lack of a better word, to, at this stage of the game, still be talking about pulling people out alive. What officials hope is that down beneath street level, the World Trade Center complex went several levels down, 6 or 7 levels down. There may be people alive. They're surviving on water from restaurants that were there and food from the restaurants. It's obviously no sure thing. It may not even be a strong possibility, but that's the hope, and hope is the business they're in right now, that they'll get somebody alive. The market has moved back down a bit since we last checked it. The NASDAQ, too, not since October of '98 has it looked this way. Jeff Locke is in Overland Park, Kansas, suburban Kansas City, at a Charles Schwab Center, and he joins us now. Jeff?
That's right, Aaron. We're trying to get to ground zero on this market and see what people out here in the real world are. As you know, we have been traveling this country trying to take a pulse, and today the pulse is somewhere around the market, trying to get a sense from that from Kirby Webb as we travel here to Overland Park, Kansas. Tell me, what are you seeing? Are you seeing any panic selling today? Because this market is all the way down.
Well, you're right. The market is down today, but we're not seeing any panic selling. For the clients who have come in today, we've actually seen them opening new accounts and adding to their existing positions.
Mm-hmm. And what do you expect?
Well, we expect the same thing. Our advice to our clients is to maintain a long-term perspective and keep a diversified portfolio.
I want to go talk to at least one of the people who chose today to open an account, because we had talked earlier about people who kind of almost patriotically intended to get into the market today. This man is one of them. I see the red, white, and blue on you. And why did you? Was this self-interest today? Do you think this is a good buying opportunity or something else?
Well, living here in Kansas, there's not a whole lot I feel I can do as an individual as to show my support. So I thought this would be really a good opportunity to show my support, invest into the market, and I've opened up an SEP account for myself and my employees that work for me.
So this was something you were planning to do anyway, or you chose today specifically for this?
I've been thinking about it, and in light of all that's happened, I thought today would be a wonderful day to show my support.
And lastly, are you worried at all? You're looking at 600 points down here, or do you see that that's a good time to get in because you may get some bargains?
Well, I think both. I'm not really nervous. I'm not putting my last dollar into the stock market. I'm putting enough in there to be comfortable and to show my support.
Sir, I appreciate the time. Kirby, thank you. Also, we will, of course, continue to watch this here at the grassroots. As he said, no panic selling, at least in this office here in the middle of Kansas, but we'll keep listening. Aaron?
Well, it's not easy to hang on, and on a day like this, the market down 600 and almost 60 points, so it is admirable optimism. Jeff, thanks for your efforts. We have a special edition of Talkback Live with Bobby Batista coming up in just a moment, but first a break. CNN's continuing coverage of America's new war in a moment.
If you are seeking someone you believe to be missing from the attack on the World Trade Center or the Pentagon, log on to cnn.com/missing to submit a photograph and description. Please include your contact information.
The search for life and loved ones continues as President Bush promises victory against terrorism. For complete coverage, stay with CNN.
Medicare medication coverage. Are you having difficulty using inhalers or mixing your breathing medications? Do you use Proventil or Albuterol, Atrovent, Combivent, or other breathing medications? Did you know that if you qualify, Medicare covers breathing medications that are already premixed? To find out if you qualify, call us at Med4Home.
Call toll-free 1-800-403-3609.
Is your child protected for the future? For years, Gerber has been telling you about the Grow Up Plan. It's a $5,000 cash value life insurance policy that costs less than $1 per week. At age 21, the protection doubles to $10,000 with no increase in premiums. Call now for your free information package. The Gerber Life Grow Up Plan, a solid investment in your child's future. Call now.
Call this toll-free number for free information about Gerber's Grow Up Plan. Call now.
This is CNN.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another expanded special edition of Talkback Live. America Speaks Out. Today, America is back at work, if not back to normal, but still in the back of everyone's minds. The question this week is retaliation. What happens next? Joining us first to talk about this today, Georgia Congressman Bob Barr. Also with us, Pat Schroeder, former Congresswoman from Colorado. She is currently President and CEO of the Association of American Publishers. Let me start with Congressman Barr for a few moments, if I could. I know that you circulated a declaration of war amongst your fellow Congresspeople up in Washington. I know you probably got a fair amount of signatures on that. You ended up with an authorization of force. Is that enough?
Certainly I support the President in whatever he believes is most appropriate as Commander-in-Chief right now. My personal view is that we ought to be declaring war on international terrorism and those who harbor international terrorists. The reason, Bobby, that I and others have proposed this, including people such as former Ambassador to the UN, James Patrick, former Education Secretary Bennett.
We're having trouble with your mic. Let's switch it out there. There we go.
Former...
You're good.
Is that okay? Former Speaker Newt Gingrich and a number of others, is because only a declaration of war gives our president the maximum flexibility to proceed as he sees fit. If we go the route, Bobby, of simply proposing and then passing a specific military authorization for a particular purpose or period of time, that isn't sufficient to take us through the long haul or to contemplate all possible circumstances. So that's why I think it's so important to go the declaration of war route.
Kind of eliminates a lot of paperwork, I think is what you're saying.
Well, there are questions of international sovereignty that you surmount if you have a declaration of war under certain international conventions that you would otherwise have to worry about if you have simply a U.S. law authorizing force.
What do you think is appropriate action at this point in time?
I think it's appropriate to begin action very, very quickly to take out those international terrorist individuals, organizations, and infrastructure that we already know about. And we know a great deal about these people and these organizations, Bobby, even though their elusive nature may mean that we don't know where a particular individual is at every moment in time. We know where most of them are. We know where their infrastructure is. We know where their funding comes from. We know who harbor them. So there is an awful lot that can be done quickly. And I am not among those who subscribes to having to telegraph when we're going to do this. I believe that we ought to move quickly without any warning.
We heard the president say pretty much that Osama bin Laden should be taken in dead or alive. So I assume that you agree with him that these terrorists should be eliminated rather than brought to justice or brought to trial?
I'll let the Lord worry about justice for them. I think we ought to take them out and take them out as quickly as we can locate them. I don't think we need to worry about Miranda warnings in a war situation.
Let me bring a former Congresswoman, Pat Schroeder, into this. A declaration of war, do you think that's needed?
Well, obviously the problem is that we don't know the war against whom, but clearly everybody wants action, and we want action when we really know who we can target it. Now, I think Congressman Barr makes a lot of good points. We do have an awful lot of cells we know about, and as we hear more and more other countries saying they support us, it would be wonderful if everybody moved against the cells in their area. Obviously, Osama bin Laden, he has been, if not culpable in this incident and certainly many others, so no matter what, if you can find a way to finally capture him, the whole world would exhale. But not for too long, because there are others around too. I think one of the important pieces is also looking at the banking system. Maybe not the Swiss, but I would really like to know if this money came through Switzerland. You know, the rest of the world is having to be transparent, and yet we are finding that there are certain countries who don't do that, and I think they really are allowing these people to operate. And we really need to say to the global community, no more of that stuff. Everybody has to be transparent at this level. We really can't allow those laws to stay where people can hide their money and then do all sorts of evil things with it.
Congressman, wasn't an effort made to freeze Osama bin Laden's assets? How far did you get with that?
We haven't been able to do that yet, Bobby, but my good friend and former colleague Pat Schroeder makes a very, very good point. We do need to start putting considerable pressure on some of these international financial centers. We know, by and large, where the funds that supply Osama bin Laden and other of these terrorists come from. It's not just personal funds that they have, even though he personally is a very, very wealthy man. They get information, finances from a lot of different sources, and a lot of it, as Ms. Schroeder said, is funneled through accounts in Europe, including in Switzerland. And these countries could be doing an awful lot more than they have been doing to help us in the effort to locate and freeze these assets.
This man's network, and we heard Colin Powell refer to him today as basically the chairman of a holding company, is so far-flung. And some of these extremist fanatics are being harbored in a number of Arab countries. How do we go about this and walk that fine line where we have to accomplish what we need to in order to rid the world of terrorism, but we don't want to create some geopolitical disaster in the process?
Well, it is a fine line, and to be honest with you, I have tremendous faith in President Bush and Secretary Rumsfeld and our other leaders. I think we're in very, very good and capable hands. We also have very strong and knowledgeable bipartisan leadership in the Congress that will work with us. But it is a fine line. I think you have to begin military operations very quickly. Our people, by and large, are very supportive of that, and I think you can't overlook the importance of maintaining national unity and moving forward on behalf of the American people. But we also have to remember that a huge quantity of our petroleum that we need both for our civilian and our military operations comes from the Middle East. We haven't done a good job in the last 20 years of developing our own resources. So we can't just go in and start carpet bombing countries. We have to be smart about it. But you start where the main problem is, and that is in countries like Afghanistan and others who very clearly and in a lot of instances for a long period of time have been harboring and supporting these people, countries like Syria, Iraq, and Libya, and possibly Iran also.
Congresswoman?
Bobby, if I could add, I certainly agree with what the congressman has said, but I think we have some other pieces we can do too. I am thankful every night that Colin Powell is our Secretary of State, because he had all of this high profile during the Gulf War. And it really is helpful to be able to say to some of those Gulf states who, let's face it, have been indirectly funding or directly funding some of these activities, mainly because they thought it would take some of the focus off of them. Wait a minute, you really ought to think about this. Guess who pulled your cookies out of the oven during the whole Gulf War? But for Colin Powell and the United States military and the whole U.S. government, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia may not be in the hands they're in now. I think we all know the answer to that. And so, as a consequence, I think it is really time to stop winking at their kind of playing both sides. It's like, well, you've got to understand we live in a difficult neighborhood, so wink, wink, we have your oil, you'll come if we're threatened, and meanwhile, we have to try and buy these folks out. I really think the American people are totally beyond any tolerance with that. So I think you try and shut that down. You try and go after banks that have been kind of hiding this in Switzerland and allowing this man to operate, because this took a huge amount of money. These people were never without money. So money was flowing. Money was flowing from all sorts of places. And I don't think the American public will tolerate that one more minute.
Let me go to a Gulf War vet on the phone. Kevin from Ohio. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yes, ma'am. As you say, I am a Gulf War veteran, and I do support going to war and getting the terrorists and making them pay for the damage and the harm and the pain that they've caused here in the United States. But I do hope that if we do go over there and we do cause a conflict, that we do it completely this time and not like Desert Storm. I mean, we liberated Kuwait over there, but the job was not finished. If we go after the terrorists that attacked our country, I want us to finish the job. The American people has taken America for granted, thinking it would never happen to us, it couldn't happen here. And now that it has happened, America is stunned because we thought we was this invincible country.
Kevin,
and now we're,
I was going to thank you very much. I wanted the Congress folks here to address that. I'm not sure that we'll ever know that we're done in this war. Do you think, Congressman?
Well, Bobby, the question came up at a news conference we had in Washington last week when we announced the introduction of our proposed declaration of war. One of the media people in Washington asked, well, how will you know when we've won? I think we'll have a pretty good indication of when we will have at least achieved significant success. We may never eradicate from the face of the earth every terrorist, just the same as despite years of our war against mind-altering drugs, we'll never have a completely drug-free society. But that does not mean that we as a nation don't try. And I think, again, as I said and as others have said, we know a great deal about these organizations, I think, and people already, as we've gotten into the first week since this tragedy, we're finding out disturbing things about how much we actually did know, but the right information didn't get to the right people and so forth.
I was going to say, if we knew so much, how did intelligence miss this one?
Well, that's one of the most fundamental questions that we're starting to look at, and I think it is a question that we have to get some answers to. I think we're seeing, unbelievably as it is, 60 years after Pearl Harbor, Bobby, we're still seeing some of the same problems that plagued us back then. Poor cooperation from between our different intelligence agencies, people tending to discount certain very important information or intelligence that came in, lack of proper coordination, things not getting to the right people, and then, of course, the problems in executing proper security measures at our airports. It's really not so much the traveling public that is the problem here. It's allowing people access to the most sensitive areas of airports without background checks, without properly following up on lost badges, lost flight manuals, lost uniforms, and paperwork and so forth. These are very, very serious problems. And even though it's important perhaps for us to look at what new powers, if any, we need to grant to our government, I'm not interested in a headlong rush to pass more laws and take away more civil liberties. I think the problems are with enforcement of existing laws.
All right, hold on just a second here. Let me go to the audience. Reverend, do you have concerns?
It concerns me that we have not yet finished mourning the people who are considered or assumed to be dead, and there's many lives that are still coming up lost. There are families that are suffering and will continue to suffer, and it's my concern that we don't need to rush right now and send our young kids over there to shed more blood. We need to kind of get those who have been affected by this, let's give them a decent burial. And then I call on all the churches in America, let's the churches step up to the plate and adopt a family. Let's the churches provide $1,000 to each one of these families, because we got breadwinners that are gone, that are lost, and children that don't have fathers, children that don't have mothers. We got breadwinners that have been lost, and I think now is the greatest time that the church can come forward, stand up, and give $1,000 to each family through the Red Cross. Let the Red Cross identify a family. The church would send that $1,000 to the Red Cross.
Good idea, Reverend. We're putting you in charge of that. Okay.
I would love to be in charge of that.
All right.
Through the Red Cross only, though.
Let me get an opinion here from Jason quickly.
My opinion is this: you have to remember, this has not bin Laden's first attack against the United States. This is a repeated several of attacks, and he is not going to stop. We have to take action against him and his organization now. I mean, how do you feel if you were going to go to a football game or to a baseball game? You're going to have to worry if bin Laden has his people there to blow it up. We have to take action. And as far as to declaring war against Afghanistan, we've given Afghanistan and the Taliban ample warning that anyone who aids and abets these fugitives, there will be no distinction. And the Taliban today refused to hand over bin Laden. So just like in the United States, even though if you don't commit a crime and you're not there, you're still an accessory. You know, Afghanistan and the Taliban, they're still an accessory to bin Laden and his terrorist acts against us.
And Larry over here quickly.
Yeah, I agree with you, absolutely. But, you know, I believe that it's imperative that we do strike back. But first of all, I also think that it's important that we gather intelligence on the people that were involved, the factions, the organizations that were behind this. I think it's imperative that we know who these people are. Undoubtedly, innocent people are going to be killed. I mean, that's just one of the consequences of war. But the bottom line is, let's just not go over there half-cocked. Let's go over there with a purpose, and let's execute that purpose when we go over there.
Congressman, looking to the future, and before you get out of here, I wanted to ask you about the counter-terrorist measures that Congress has been asked to pass. What will those entail? And I know there's a couple in particular that you would like to see changed.
One area, Bobby, that I have actually been working on for over a year now is to untie the hands of both our president and our intelligence agencies in a couple of areas. For example, to me, it doesn't seem to make any sense if we give a president authority to wage war and to bomb areas around the world, whether it's Kosovo, Somalia, or very possibly now Afghanistan, to try and take out a foreign terrorist leader, and yet we don't give him the authority to go in with a Delta Force team or a special operations team and take out that one individual. That doesn't make any sense, yet for a generation we've had a restriction on the books that won't allow us to assassinate a foreign terrorist leader. We ought to repeal that so the president has the full range of options available to him. Also, we don't need to tie the hands of our intelligence agencies so that they can only deal with those foreign agencies that have the same view of human rights as we do. That severely limits the ability of our intelligence agencies to gather intelligence information that could save us from this sort of thing.
Can't deal with just Boy Scouts, that's for sure.
There are very few in the world outside of America.
All right, Congressman Babar, I know you've got to go, but thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you, Bobby, and it's great
joining
being
us
with my
today.
former colleague and friend, Pat Schroeder.
And she will be staying with us as we go to a break here in just a few moments. Let me do some emails. Helen in North Carolina says, we must not give the terrorists what they want. To retaliate with force would give them an excuse to do it to us again. Just impose severe sanctions and embargoes on Afghanistan and any other country that supports the terrorists. Nick emails us, the morale of the American people will never rise until they see evidence that someone is paying dearly for this outrage. Stay with us. Gary Bauer will also be joining us. We'll be back right after this.
Among the highest number of graduates in computer science and engineering in the country. Over 4,700 graduates in computer and information sciences. Over 5,000 graduates in engineering, including chemical and bioengineering. And they all graduated from the same place. Just who produces this kind of talent for the workforce each and every year?
Pennsylvania.
Now's the best time to join America Online.
If I knew it was this easy, I would have started a long time ago.
Because now you can try AOL and get our best offer ever. 1,000 hours of AOL free for 45 days.
Plug it in and you go.
You don't need a credit card to join AOL. Call 1-877-265-0100 and be online in minutes.
America Online is the easy one.
Our free 24-hour customer service representatives are always available by phone.
Customer service is always there to help.
1,000 hours for 45 days free. Call 1-877-265-0100 to get everything AOL offers.
You've got mail.
I've got mail. I love when an instant message pops up.
AOL has parental controls, and that's a good thing.
Chat, instant messages, email.
AOL has it all. Now you can join AOL right over the phone. You don't even need a credit card.
Fire up the computer and off you go.
Get online in minutes. Our operators are standing by.
If we could do it, anyone can.
America Online, so easy to use, no wonder it's number one. Call 1-877-265-0100 for AOL's best offer ever.
Want to earn money market rates on your checking account?
Open a super interest checking account online with My Bank USA. You'll earn the highest interest rate with a minimum balance of only $2,500, and you can pay your bills online.
You can also apply for super interest checking online. It's a great way to earn money market interest on your checking account.
To learn more, go to mydiscountbroker.com and click on My Bank USA.
Introducing new Kellogg's Special K Red Berry cereal. Crunchy sweet flakes, now with slices of real strawberries, right in the box. Looking good, never tasted so great. Kellogg's Special K Red Berries. It's new.
In Gateway Country, we know some folks hold off on buying new technology until the price comes down. Heck, some are still waiting on color TV. Oh, that's better. Well, now the Gateway Performance 1500 PC featuring the Intel Pentium 4 processor comes loaded for just $9.99. That's highly advanced performance at a price to suit anybody. And I mean anybody. Get a free upgrade to Windows XP when you buy this Gateway PC.
After another day of mourning, those left standing continue their search for life and loved ones. And the stage is set for a borderless war, as President Bush promises victory against terrorism. For complete coverage, stay with CNN.
Welcome back. Joining us now is CNN's Nick Robertson, who is the only Western correspondent in Afghanistan. He joins us from Kandahar by way of video phone. And Nick, we know that Pakistani officials met with leaders of the Taliban today in order to demand that they turn over Osama bin Laden. Have you heard anything about how that meeting went?
Well, the Taliban officials have characterized the meetings as that they are
considering what's been told to them. They also say, however, that they've heard it all before. The focus really shifts from where we are, which is the spiritual capital of for the Taliban, Kandahar in the south of Afghanistan, to Kabul in the north tomorrow, where 600 of the country's top religious leaders will gather to debate just that issue of Osama bin Laden and the issue of what Afghanistan would do if it were to be attacked in the coming days.
I asked you on Saturday if it was considered certain that Osama bin Laden was in Afghanistan. I think that you answered that we were pretty much to assume that. Do you think that's still the case, or is it likely that he is not there?
It's highly likely that he is here. We certainly haven't heard anything to the contrary. It does have to be said that the borders with Pakistan are incredibly porous, and although we've heard today that Pakistan is sealing its borders more effectively with Afghanistan to keep out a flood of refugees that might seek shelter there, there are deserts in these borders where it's very, very difficult for Pakistani authorities to patrol. I was there with their anti-narcotics force a couple of years ago, going over these desert areas in helicopters, and you could see mile upon mile upon mile where cars were just able to drive freely across the border. So it would be possible for him to sneak across the border, but it would probably put him in more danger if he were to do that, because he would be putting himself closer to possible apprehension.
Questions from the audience for you. Let me take one from Ray.
Thank you. I was wondering, to what extent is Pakistan willing to support the U.S. once we do attack Afghanistan? Will they give us the permission to use the airspace, or will we be allowed to go on land with forces across their country?
Well, so far the Pakistan leadership has indicated that it would want to debate each issue exactly what they were going to do, but so far they've been very clear that they will give whatever support is required. And certainly the Pakistani officials, in contrast with the way they've dealt with the Taliban in the past, those diplomats coming here today have delivered a very, very hard, tough, straight-in-the-face message, if you will, to the Taliban. This is quite uncharacteristic of Pakistani-Taliban relationships in the past. So it would appear very clear at this time that Pakistan is very much behind America on this issue, although the very specifics of land, exactly whether they can use ports, etc., we understand that those will have to be worked out case by case. Certainly, though, Pakistan has a lot to offer the United States in those particular assets.
Eric, question?
Yes. Is there visible evidence that Afghanistan is preparing to go to war with the United States?
Certainly, their leader, Mullah Omar, made a public address a couple of days ago, and the way he did that was on the radio system here, the national radio system. The Taliban, of course, banned all televisions when they came to power 5 years ago. And in that address, he really gave people a pep talk, pumped them up, if you will, in preparation for a possible war. He told people to put their faith in God, in Allah, and if they did that, then they should be safe, that they should not be afraid of America. So there's been a sort of a preparation of the population, if you will. In terms of a military preparation, certainly we just traveled 300 miles yesterday driving down from the capital, Kabul, down here to Kandahar in the south. And I must say, we didn't see any military preparation on the way down. There were perhaps only 2 checkpoints between here and Kabul, 300 miles away. So we don't get the feeling on the ground right here where we are that there is an intense military build-up going, but it also has to be said the Taliban have a lot of assets deployed in the north fighting their ongoing civil war, and they don't have a huge amount of military assets anyway. What they really have is a lot of young, dedicated fighters willing to throw down their life to put Taliban in power over the whole country.
All right, Nick Robertson, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate all the information you bring us once again. We will continue here. Are we taking a break or continuing on? We're taking a quick break here, and then we'll be back with Pat Schroeder and Gary Bauer. Stay with us.
I remember 20 years ago how they turned the racing world upside down. First by introducing a race car with quattro all-wheel drive, and second by having a woman driving.
bringing you the latest reports as events unfold in America's new war. Stay with CNN.
How would you like to lose that big belly and save big money? Then you need the Abdur system, designed to aerobically burn fat as it flattens your abs in just minutes a day, and it's yours for a fraction of the cost. Look, ab machines strengthen muscles but won't reduce your waist, and some exercises can make your muscles bigger. Only the Abdur's rotating torso trimmer targets your upper abs, lower abs, and obliques, all in one fat-burning circular motion. You'll flatten your stomach in weeks, not months. We guarantee it.
Before I started using the Abdur system, I was really unhappy the way I looked. Ever since I started using the Abdur system, I started seeing immediate results, and I feel so much happier and more confident in everything I do.
These machines cost up to $8,000. The Abdur does the work of all these machines. Millions have sold for 5 payments of only $29.95. But if you call now, we'll lower the price to 5 payments of only $19.95. That's a $50 savings. Plus, you get the Abdobix nutritional guide and motivational video free. We guarantee you'll lose at least 2 inches in just 10 days or your money back. So call now.
This remote control is my magic wand to summon the police, fire department, paramedics, or my doctor. It contacts Life Alert, my 24-hour personal security service. I've told their computers where I live, about my husband's heart condition, his medication, and who to call in case of emergency.
Oh.
So what is it?
I've got a pain in my chest.
We're summoning the paramedics and your doctor, Mr. Perkins. Help is on the way.
With Life Alert, you're never alone.
Thank God for Life Alert. I owe my life to it. I know. My life was on the line and they saved it.
Call the number on your screen to receive your free information about Life Alert's round-the-clock 24-hour protection. The phone call and information are free. Don't delay. Please call this toll-free number now.